right, welcome everybody. It is time for another edition. Well, I guess a first edition we should call this one. Carey Murdock here with you guys. It's the Soonerscoop.com podcast, and we don't really have an official name for this one yet, but I want to welcome in Joe DuVall and Eddie Radosevich, and this is kind of our team podcast, not really our recruiting podcast that we have with Josh McQuiston from time to time, but guys, welcome to the program. Eddie, Joe, it's just you and you three, us three. No Josh McQuiston on this one, so we're going to talk a lot about what we saw this spring during spring football, kind of wrap things up there, but excited for the new show, excited for the Soonerscoop.comers to be able to start getting a team podcast every once in a while.
I think it's a long time coming. I'm glad that we're all here today. We'll take, I guess we can take recommendations on podcast names on the board if you want to.
Yeah, we could do that.
Throw a couple out there, or even throw a couple on Twitter. Hit me, Carey, or Joe up. I guess we could take, suggestions. I don't know if it's going to be any type of contest, but we'll definitely take recommendations.
We'll get plenty of vulgar ones, I'm sure about that. And Joe DuVall, welcome in as well. And Joe, you've been doing a great job, I know, covering a lot of the draft stuff, kind of getting up some articles there, talking about what's going on tonight. We're going to talk about that a little bit today as well, but welcome, Joe.
Yeah, it's good to be here. And I would guess Three Amigos, probably too cliche, right?
I don't know. I do like Three Amigos, man. That was one of my favorite shows growing up.
Only if we could have a mariachi band come in and serenade us at the beginning of every...
You know I hate mariachi bands.
I realize that.
How about we just have... If we get Mexican food, that'd be okay.
I was actually at Thunder practice yesterday and talking to Barry Trammell, and he saw me at one of my worst moments in life. We were on the boardwalk, the Riverwalk in San Antonio. It was a long time ago. It must have been for the 2007 Big 12 championship when Oklahoma played Missouri. Missouri was number 1.
Chase Daniel.
But we went to the Riverwalk and ate at a Mexican restaurant. And I don't. This is why I don't drink tequila. I get a little mean when I drink tequila. So we were having margaritas, and the mariachi band came up, and I don't like them even before I started drinking margaritas. And I literally yelled at the mariachi band to go away, and I thought Barry Trammell would never talk to me again.
Well, at least you didn't throw him in the river.
That was you remember that canal. That was the infamous Mike DeArmond rant. You remember when he went up into his room? I don't know, Joe, you might be too young to remember this, but he went up into his room and basically called the Oklahoma fans a bunch of spoiled brats and entitled and arrogant. And then after they won, he made an apology video, which he had obviously been drinking in. But it was one of the greatest videos of all time.
You know, in 2007, I was actually a freshman at the University of Oklahoma.
Okay.
And that Mizzou rivalry was real at the time. It doesn't shock me that DeArmond had a bit of a feud going on and the tequila involved and all that stuff. But Missouri and Oklahoma there for a stretch were not getting along. That was not a
it was
friendly
a good rivalry, yeah.
And it wasn't friendly.
Well, they have nasty fans. I mean, Eddie, you remember the year we went and they've screwed up our credentials?
I walked all over Columbia that day, getting up to the stadium.
That was when OU was number 1.
And they ran back the opening kickoff.
Landry Jones threw an interception to Alden Smith in that game.
That was a hell of a play, though.
It was a really good play, but those people are...
Yeah, that was a nasty game.
They're disgusting.
And
I'm not afraid to say
the weather was terrible that night. That was a crazy game. Was that 2007 Chase Daniel game? Is that the infamous booger picking game as well?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's what reminds me of Chase Daniel.
He and Sam Bradford are actually teammates now.
Hopefully,
that is bizarre.
Hopefully only for like a week. Hopefully they are for only a week.
And Joe is a huge Broncos fan.
Yes, sir.
He has the Broncos gear on right now.
Yes, sir. Got the polo.
You world champions. Congratulations. I'd love to see Sam Bradford end up in Denver. Well, the NFL draft is going on tonight. As we record this podcast, we are, about 3 short, sweet hours away? Not quite that many. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about in the first round tonight. I think it would be a surprise if we have much to talk about. But what we really wanted to get into was the spring football for Oklahoma. And Joe and Eddie are here. And guys, I know both of you guys followed it really closely. Joe was at the spring game. Can we talk about what happened at the spring game with you,
God.
Joe?
Oh, God.
Is it too soon?
No, you can go for it. I'm open to it. I might cry on a podcast.
Joe had the assignment, and granted, I'm a terrible trainer.
It's not your fault.
Joe had sideline duty. It was his first in-game duty as a Sooner Scoop staff member. My chair just about killed me. He was Eddie shoots fantastic video. Eddie,
of course.
I'm going to ask you another question in a minute, Eddie. Joe's assignment was to take still photography.
Mm-hmm. Should be easier, right? Less of those.
We put it on the dummy
proof.
Dummy setting.
Yeah, it was supposed to be
it's
dummy
just
proof.
a man running. All it is a dial that you turn, and it's just a man running to signify I want to take action photos.
Yeah, it has the picture there for you in case you're confused. Oh yeah, take the picture of the man running. Okay, good.
There's like one of a mountain. You know you're not taking pictures of mountains.
Not mountains. Nope.
There's a woman.
Nope, not taking.
You know you're not taking close-ups of a woman.
Nope.
There's a guy running. That's the one you want.
Yep.
That wasn't the problem though.
No, I got that.
The pictures that you took were fantastic. All 7 of them.
I think there were 11, but maybe it was 7.
I still haven't. I'm sorry. You asked me to send the ones that you could actually see.
I pathetically asked Carey after taking hundreds of pictures only to have 7 to 11 come through. I said, Carey, can I at least see the 7 to 11?
If we
They
were,
at least look good.
I need to send those. There are some good. You got some good Calvin Thibodeau ones, which was actually one of the main instructions I sent you. I said, get us some good Calvin Thibodeau pictures because he's a new coach. We need plenty of those for the site. But you would think, like, I wish we were on television right now because we could put a list of how did Joe screw up. Like, did he leave the lens cap on?
Nope.
Did he forget to put the lens on?
No, we had a lens.
Did he forget to secure the card in the camera? Is that... Well, hold on. Gosh, dang it.
It's okay, Joe.
You know, here's the thing.
At least it wasn't the Ohio State game.
You know, this is the deal with the memory card, okay? It looked like it was in there. It's such a silly little thing. You can go to school, you can learn about this stuff, you can work all these days, you can learn all about the equipment, but if you don't push the dadgum card in all the way, it's not going to work. And that's exactly what happened.
I will admit, it was some kind of freak, weird situation because those cards tell you when they're not pushed in. It was like it hung. It was like a hanging chad of a SD card.
I'm okay if we get the Supreme Court involved here.
Somehow, it went in just far enough not to like spring load out, which it would do if you don't have it pushed in all the way. So I get the camera back from Joe, and we come back from the game. Eddie's he's uploading video. I'm working on my stories, and I'm like, okay, we got to edit some. We need some photos for Eddie's video, and I open up the little door, and the card just shoots out like that's never happened before.
Like a toaster?
Exactly. And so I go, we use a program called Adobe Lightroom. This is way too much inside information, I'm sure. And so I put it in there, and it will show you an entire list of photos, and I've figured, man, we're going to have hundreds of really good photos that we're going to use all summer. Maybe thousands.
There were a lot.
And the list comes up, and it says, and you had 2 cards. I gave you 2 cards. And the list comes up, and there's 7 photos on there.
7 great photos.
And I thought to myself, I think they were all of Dede Westbrook. I thought to myself, okay, I've got the wrong card. So I got a card he didn't use. And so I get the other card. I put it in there. 4 pictures. And then I think to myself, I remembered when I opened that door, that card just shot out there. He didn't actually have the card in the camera. So, congratulations,
okay.
Joe.
I'm taking a bow.
You got to admit, as a boss, I was very understanding, was I not?
Oh, you were super understanding.
I called you first to deliver the bad news because I knew if I didn't call you, you'd be calling me the next day saying, hey, what happened to all those photos I took?
Carey called me and he said, you're going to hate me right now. And then he delivered the news. And then he proceeded to laugh at me in like a jovial, laughing with you kind of way, letting me know, this isn't a big deal. He was a great boss, very understanding, and that didn't matter. I still crawled into a hole that night and just sat there.
It's something that you'll take with you for the rest of your career. that you'll remember.
You know what?
And you know what? I guarantee you this, Joe. You will never make the mistake of not properly putting the memory card in the camera.
That's true. And here's the deal. Maybe I'm smarter here than I realize. I'm just setting the bar so low. I'm just putting the expectation game real low. And then from now on, it's only good things. The next time I go out, okay, he put the memory card in. We're good. We're improving. So you got that's a lesson out there for you new professionals. Set the bar low.
Now, Eddie, have you ever had a screw up that big?
Oh, I don't like the pause.
I can't remember.
What's your worst screw up? You've never lost a camera or anything.
No.
You're pretty good with not losing equipment.
I guess pissing off that lady at in Ames was maybe my biggest screw up when she sent you and Josh a letter saying that I stood in the middle of the cheerleading.
You ruined the game for the cheerleaders.
Yeah,
because you were shooting video on the sideline.
And everything
that remains the greatest complaint letter I've ever received. Not just about like my subscription or me. Like most complaint letters are just about me. Like you're a jerk. You suck.
That was up there as far as just bewildering statements ever made by anybody that's attended a Division I football game.
So I'm confused. Did you block the cheerleaders' view? Is that what happened?
No, he didn't do anything wrong.
Well, they were the ones that screwed up to begin with because they're the ones standing where all of the cameras are supposed to stand.
Iowa State does not have a good sideline.
No.
Or a good sideline policy. They're not. Let's just say they're not used to a big. They're not used to having people that care about the other team on their side.
Right. That'd probably be the best way to put it.
So we'll get back into that. That's a story. We'll put a pin in it. It's a story for. I literally need to find that email. We can read some of it on a podcast one of these days.
That would be awesome.
All right, so let's get to our impressions from the spring, and we'll just do this kind of roundtable. Like you guys know, I talk enough every day. I would love for you guys to carry the show. I will pipe in here and there, but I already do a 3.5, 4 hour show every day on the radio. So people don't need to keep hearing from me all the time. Let me start with you, Eddie. Your number one impression from the spring after the 14 or whatever practices that we covered.
Okay, this will be kind of a 2-point question or 2-part answer, I guess. I'd say the first part would just coming out of spring was realizing the progress that the direction of the program has made since maybe the last couple years being down there around the football team. There's maybe not that question of is this team going to make that next step? Is Bob losing the program? I guess you could say, quote unquote, because I think there was a lot of people going into even last year, especially after they lost the Texas game, that were still having their doubts. And I think just seeing all the guys that are returning. And most importantly, probably a guy in Baker Mayfield, seeing what they were able to do and how they're able to build off of what they've done going into the playoffs last year. So I would say just my number one impression of going into spring was going back or trying to get back to where they were a season ago, getting back to the playoffs, getting more guys involved as far as just guys that are team leaders within the program. And I think that was probably the number one thing that Oklahoma wanted to identify this spring was just who are the leaders in the program right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Eddie. I think that this year you could really feel that there was a direction. You didn't feel like there was this aimless. You weren't sure where the program was headed. Where's the future? You feel good.
You've got a Lincoln Riley. You could tell he was in his second year.
Yeah, you could feel that confidence. You could feel that the players understood their roles better. You could feel that there was a developing narrative of what this team needed to do and what was expected of them to do great things. Where in the past, at least in recent years especially, I think fans especially felt this kind of aimless. They were unsure of where the program was headed, and now it has that direction. I think that's a great point, Eddie.
I think you could talk about the tenor, too, of the program, Eddie, and what you're talking about is they're really in a good place. Yep. I mean, the coaching staff, I think, is fantastic. I think Kerry Cook's a great balance to Mike Stoops. When you talk to the defensive backs, they can now kind of laugh when you ask them about Mike Stoops because they know that he's not lording over them. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit. It's been good for the secondary. I think having Kerry Cooks here. I think the linebackers. That's a whole nother discussion that we're going to have. That's a different story maybe for another segment. But you're right. I mean, the tenor of the program is totally different. It's very positive. It's upbeat. You look at the way recruiting is going right now. You see why recruiting is going well because everybody's getting along. Now, Joe, was there something a little bit different for you just in terms of your number one impression from the spring?
Yeah, I'll go a little more just focused on a specific position rather than a big scale. And I'll say that the backup quarterback situation I think was better than people expected, better than I certainly expected. I remember when Austin Kendall came in this spring, who's supposed to still be a high school senior, and people were like, he's got some work to do. He's got to develop. He still looks like a high school quarterback. And so I know I had this feeling that if Baker Mayfield goes down, what is there? And then going on into the next year, what is behind him? Or do you have to wait for Chris Robinson? But now you see Austin Kendall looked like a sharp, composed Division I quarterback already. And so that makes you feel good about the future. And maybe not this year. Maybe if Baker Mayfield gets hurt, Austin Kendall can't come in and win games in the same way. But it makes you feel better moving forward than I think than you had before if you were an OU fan. And also, Kyler Murray, man, he's fast. I mean, he's one of those things.
Yeah, he really is.
It's one of those things until you see him up close and in person, you don't really appreciate that speed, and he can move. So whether or not he ends up winning the quarterback job in a couple of years, which will be interesting, I think he'll have a role in this offense, and I think that's got to make you feel good if you're an OU fan.
I love his speed, Kyler Murray. I love his arm. I just question that size, man. He's so small. I mean, he's going to be throwing through windows with Orlando Brown and somebody else that's going to be 6'4", 6'5", and that's just life. That's just physics. I mean, you can't when the window's not there and you're not 6'4", 6'5". It's a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw Trevor Knight have problems getting it through windows. I mean, Drew Brees. You watch Drew Brees play.
Tippy toes.
Yeah, I mean, he's on his tippy toes, and there are throws that he knows he can't make, and he doesn't make them, which are, things in the middle of the line. So,
yeah.
But with that athleticism, that arm strength, maybe there's more. I mean, sure, there's going to have to be a lot more positives than negatives. But I'll say this, and it was, I remember Dusty Dvorak and I were kind of disagreeing a little bit on what we thought of the quarterbacks. He thought that he's in love with Kyler Murray. I thought that Austin Kendall got a little bit of a bad rap just because, to me, when he made that play, rolling out, throwing to Dahu Green in the end zone, on the run, and that was, 40, 50 yards downfield? Yeah. Wind conditions like they were. Dahu should have caught that ball. That was the most impressive throw that even Baker Mayfield included that any of the quarterbacks made during the red and white game.
That was into the wind, too.
Yeah.
I would argue that was the most talked about play following the spring game, and I don't know how often an incomplete pass has been the most talked about play following the spring game, but that throw really resonated with a lot of people, and you could see that talent there coming out of Austin Kendall. And
this is what else I said after the game. Kyler Murray has played in an SEC game before. He's played in front of 80,000 people.
Offensive Freshman of the Year, right?
I believe so. Yeah. So I mean, that was Austin Kendall's first time to be in that environment. I expect only things to get better for him.
It's pretty amazing where that whole position is, just with the, I guess, addition of one guy, really, and that being namely Lincoln Riley. And just, I think it's a confidence that he's kind of instilled in those guys in that quarterback room. And then I also think that he's gone out and found guys, and I guess you can't really say that he found Kyler, but he went out and identified Austin Kendall, and a guy that just being, I guess, character, composure-wise, kind of lines up with Lincoln, and as far as in the way that we were talking to him after the spring, and just how confident it seems like Austin Kendall is in himself, in his game, and what they are trying to do down there.
Well, like I said, I want you guys to kind of drive this thing, and I think you guys did a great job of identifying some people. Just for me, if I was going to say anybody else that made the biggest impression, I think we got to give some credit to maybe A.D. Miller a little bit at receiver. You didn't really see in the times that we got to watch things, you saw him make as many plays as anybody else. And when you talk to other players and coaches, he and Dahu Green's name were brought up. It's interesting. We haven't mentioned that John Humphrey transferred. His name was Eddie. When we were at practice, you ask people who's really standing out to you as young receivers. I don't once ever remember John Humphrey's name coming up.
And it was the exact opposite when we were talking to guys in Miami after he picked up Scout Team Player of the Year on offense. I mean, he was the guy that everybody was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked to him, we interviewed him, and he was talking about how big of a spring this was. And then you're right, it's like I don't know if maybe Jarvis Baxter, D.D. Westbrook, those slot guys just did that much better than he did, or is OU going in a different direction with putting Mark Andrews into more of that slot role and trying to get bigger bodies out there?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Eddie, because I think if you polled most people, they would have had John Humphrey as the backup slot guy coming into the spring. I mean,
I know I did.
Yeah, behind Mark Andrews. You can look at our Sooner Scoop way too early depth chart predictions that we did, and I think most of us had John Humphrey as the backup slot. And and you heard rave reviews. This wasn't somebody that no one was talking about. This wasn't and then now he's gone, and so you start to wonder: is this a bigger picture thing? Is this what OU's transitioning to on offense? And I think Carey bringing up A.D. Miller is huge because
it's brilliant. It's genius.
He was my pick for the player that had the biggest impression on me this spring because to me he looks like a guy that can do everything in Lincoln Riley's offense.
Well, look, the receivers, we all know they've got to step up, and Dahu Green, that's too many drops even in the spring game. He can't do that. And A.D. Miller certainly looked the part. Micaiah Quick, we'll see what happens to his future. There's rumors have always been out there that he might switch over to defense, but he had a really big spring game with John Humphrey transferring. That means they need even more bodies in there on the interior. Dallas Todd's a guy that has to step up, or else you could see him maybe looking at greener pasture somewhere else. But with the kids coming in, I mean, real quick, why don't you guys touch on the guys coming in? And I know you've followed a lot more breaking down film and stuff like that, but just your thoughts, Eddie. Let's start with you on guys coming in and who you think maybe could make an impact.
I guess you would have to obviously start with the first guy being Michael Jones, a guy that they got in on early out of a Rivals 100 receiver, a guy coming out of SEC country. I don't know how you couldn't not be excited about what he's going to bring when he gets onto campus. And his biggest, I think, problem, or not problem, but hurdle will be just being able to acclimate himself to the faster pace of play, everything that comes with that when you make that jump into Division I football. But I still think he's not necessarily a guy that is just first coming into the program, but I still think maybe I just have a man crush on the guy, but I still think Jordan Smallwood has some type of something that he can bring to this offense.
He's got to catch the ball too, though.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that has kept him off the field in recent years, is just not his ability to
He can get open, he can run routes, he's physical.
There is nobody that looks
you got to catch the football. Yeah,
either.
I mean, we could talk about a lot of guys over the years. The DeJuan Miller comes to mind.
Yeah. He's a guy that had a lot of accolades coming in, coming in from high school, but
that'll ruin you as a receiver. Doesn't matter what else you can do.
The one guy that I did see out of the wide receiver group that's coming in next year is Zach Farrar. I went up to Tulsa Union and saw him play, and I'll tell you what, I left that game being more impressed with Zach Farrar than maybe anybody that I saw last year. I'm trying to think of guys, just as far as he had a hell of a game. I think he had 5 receptions, 117, 120 yards, a touchdown. And sorry, Trey, he burnt Trey Brown a couple times in that game. And
Trey's really good too.
Trey is a very, very good
Trey
cornerback.
Can fly. And Trey can fly.
Man.
And so I walked out of that game, and I think I don't know. Maybe it's just because OU has had success from guys coming from big programs. But when I think of guys like Matt Diamond that came from Katy, the guys Stephen Parker that comes from Jinx, those are all coming from great programs. And Zach Farrar's obviously coming from a great program himself in South Lake Carroll down in the Dallas area.
Joe, any additional thoughts from you on that?
I'm just going to piggyback on Zach Farrar because that guy is far underrated coming in, and I'm glad we get to talk about him a little bit because he brings a physical presence that we've been talking about that OU's moving towards, some bigger 6'2", 6'3". I think he's 6'3", 200 plus pounds. But he's a guy that can not only, when you put on the tape, he's not somebody that just runs by people. He's not somebody that just makes a guy miss and goes. He'll find the first down marker, he'll stop right at it, and he'll make the catch. He'll make catches in traffic. He'll make catches over, if he has a smaller corner, he can go up and get it. If he has a bigger corner, he can work him with some double moves. He can work him underneath. He's got a full complement to his skill set, and he's someone that who it's inevitable every year when the summer workouts happen. These names pop up, some 3 stars, some no one's talking about. Oh yeah, they're really doing well. don't be shocked if Zach Farrar is that name this year.
Joe, are you buying or selling Geno Lewis?
If I had to pick one of those, I would pick sell. Based upon, I thought when he first was announced that he was transferring, that was going to be a big part of the offense, and I kind of feel like that's slipping a little bit. I think he's more seen as just a guy now in the mix.
All right, first off, you can't buy or sell people. That's illegal. All right,
That's true.
Let's look. One thing we wanted to talk about was kind of biggest area of concern on offense. I think we can all agree receiver. I mean, we just covered it. Outside of that, you're replacing Ty Darlington at center. You're replacing Neela Casatati. We know that the tackles were settled last year, but some things have come up. Christian Daimler is seemed like a guy that's emerged. By the way, I want to mention that dude. It didn't get enough attention because we're not out there every day. That dude's become really imposing looking.
Yeah,
He's a big guy.
And he's skinny.
Finally put on some weight.
He was skinny out of high school. Not just, he was
270.
Yeah, I mean, he's tall. He was not muscular. He wasn't thick. He was just kind of like a big, rangy dude, and now he's just a big dude.
I want to see more of him, but I mean, it sounds promising with him.
Creepy comment of the day. If you want to see how big he is, just go to Baker Mayfield's Instagram account. He is so much bigger
next
than
to him.
Baker. It's
He
ridiculous.
dwarfs Baker. It's crazy. I mean, he's legitimately 6'7", and now he's about 3'11", I think he was, at least listed on the rest. But anyway, you've got a lot of offensive linemen to replace. We talked about the backup quarterback situation. Running back, please. Nobody's concerned about that. But
No.
I guess outside of receiver, Joe, let's start with you. What's your biggest concern offensively?
To me, it's that interior offensive line, and it's nothing new. I think that was a problem a year ago. I think that you had, even with the senior leadership you had back there with Neela and Ty, there was too much consistent pressure coming through up the middle, which forced Baker Mayfield to scramble. And I think with new guys coming in, that problem will only persist, in my opinion. And so you have Baker Mayfield, who's going to, again, be forced to scramble, make plays on his feet, which is a good thing for Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield's really good at.
Yeah.
But this year he will not have Sterling Shepard, who, how many times did we see that guy work the sideline, keep his toes in, catch a ball that was going 3 yards out of bounds and pluck it away? D.D. Westbrook got better at that as the year went along, but that's not his natural state. And so I'll be interested to see how Mayfield and the receivers can work with if that interior line. It's kind of that it's a great example of how football, it's a team game, right? If you're an interior line, if it's not good, Baker Mayfield's on the move. And so now you need receivers to be stepping up. It's all kind of connected. And so I think that interior line, if you can't get that fixed, then that might sprout some problems in other areas on the offense.
One thing I was really kind of, I guess, surprised about as far as interior line was just how big Ben Powers is. A JUCO offensive lineman that actually came in early, was able to participate in the spring game. And
kind of the opposite of Jamal Danley a year ago, because we were like, really? That's Jamal Danley?
Yeah. He was a lot bigger than, if anything, they got stronger in the middle. If you were just based on the fact alone that I'm guessing Ben Powers can rep 225 more than 13 times.
Powers and Ford are both going to be bigger. And so, if Ashton Julius, if he plays in there,
he's a big dude.
Those guys are huge. They're going to be bigger and stronger than what they had in their year before. So if they do step up, you're right. That they will have a more girth in that interior than they had a year ago.
But, where are you as far as moving Drew Samia inside? I guess that's not really that much of a conversation anymore.
To me, the question,
unless Daimler can play right tackle,
there are people that want this conversation. There are people that want Samia in at guard, and to me, my question is why? Why do it? He was a true freshman a year ago, playing right tackle for a team that went to the college football playoff, and he was good enough, right? He wasn't spectacular or anything, but for a true freshman, he was.
Yeah.
And so to me, you ride that out. You see where that goes. And there's no guarantee that the other guy you put there, the next guy that you think might be better, there's no guarantee when the bullets start flying that he'll play that well.
Yeah, I count me in on the why move Drew Samia.
Have you seen Beatembo or any OU offensive lineman be as high as Beatembo is on Drew Samia in recent memory? I can't remember a guy.
I would say he's equally as high on Orlando Brown, though.
Right.
But no, there's something about his attitude that he really, which we know that when he was a recruit, how hard he worked.
He said he was going to come in and play.
Yeah, seeking out a lot of extra work with people. But I go back to like Jamal Brown talking about Orlando Brown, and one of my strangest moments of the spring was, you remember the first day we went out there to talk to Orlando Brown. And we get out there, what is it, 5:45 usually? When we're getting let in there, and it's that time where the sun is just beating down, like right on top of the press box, and you're trying to interview people, and you're trying to keep the sun out of your eyes. All I had to do was take one step toward Orlando Brown, and he blocked out the sun. I mean, I was just like, this dude is a mountain standing here in front of me.
They haven't had guys like that down there in a while.
Lode Holt, the last one,
Yeah.
that size, right?
Maybe.
Lode Holt, Duke Robinson were two guys that were really just physically, you're just like, whoa.
You can't put anybody in Lode Holt's category until he drinks 230s in one night, which I have witnessed.
Oh, God.
Wade Boggs can do that.
All right, well, let's move on from biggest area of concern on offense. I think we've covered that as much. Obviously, defensively, I see fewer holes, but I see some really big holes over on the defensive side. Mainly, we're talking about losing Eric Stryker, Devontae Bond. Now, one of the things I think, and I'll throw it to you guys, but one of the things I think that people have to wrap their minds around is what Mike Stoops is doing defensively. You're not replacing those two guys. You're replacing one of them, because I think you're going to see Will Johnson move back to more of a full-time. You're going to get more of a full-time 4-2-5 defense from OU. Now, you're going to have the odd front, but Will Johnson essentially is going to replace one of those linebackers. The only reason that they had Bond and Stryker on the field at the same time and switched around their defense like they did to accommodate them is because those were two of their best players. Now they know they don't have two guys like that, and Will Johnson's one of their best players, so they're going to move him back. But, I mean, obviously, guys, Eddie, we'll start with you. Just your thoughts on what you saw from the defense and your biggest concern.
Well, I think the biggest concern, obviously, is probably linebacker. I mean, you're losing, as much as people want to badmouth him, I thought Dominique Alexander, they're going to miss him in the middle, I think, maybe a little bit. And Jordan Evans, obviously, is going to come back. He's your most experienced linebacker, but you're throwing a lot of guys out there that haven't played a whole lot. Going back and watching the spring game, though, I thought Curtis Bolton took that step that maybe people wanted to see.
He always looks good in spring games, though. And then you ask about him, and you're like, "So how's he?" And you expect to get an answer like, "Oh, he's really coming along," and you never really get that.
No, and so he's going to definitely have to go out there and I think prove it. I mean, how many opportunities has he really had though to go out into an actual game besides the mop-up time in the late fourth quarter that he's been out there? I can't really remember a time when he's been actually put into a game and asked to do anything, I guess, in recent memory. I know they redshirted 2 years ago, but
yeah.
And then he's also battled injuries. I mean, he was injured for I don't think he suited out for at least 3 games last year.
Yeah.
With a boot on his foot. So and then you're gonna have to have guys like Caleb Kelly and Mark Jackson come in and probably the 2 Lackawanna guys that and actually participate and play and contribute.
Here's what concerns me most. Talking to Mike is the last time Mike Stoops and Bob Stoops, last time you talked to them when they mentioned we're really going to need freshmen to come in and contribute was 2 years ago when they had that big defensive back class coming in, and that was the year that ended up with Baylor just crushing Oklahoma and Mike Stoops and Julian Wilson fighting on the sideline. It was not a good year in the secondary. They're saying the same things about the linebackers. And in my head, I'm like, oh, this is kind of deja vu a little bit. But Joe...
Can I play devil's advocate to that? 'Cause
sure.
I think that's a good point. But do you remember the defensive line a couple years ago?
Please, don't get me started on that. That was trash.
Yeah,
there you go.
We don't have any defensive linemen.
Bob Stoops Jr. in the studio with us. 2 Bob Stoops Jr.'s.
In the end.
The whole thing about that defensive line, I'm just trying to think back now. Eric Stryker really developed. Geno Grissom was a stud who was really undervalued. And really, they screwed up his career because he should have been, I mean, he was drafted, 4th round by New England?
Yeah.
He was so athletic and so good. If they played him the right way, he would have been in there for a 1st or 2nd round draft pick. He was a freak. Of course, he had all the injuries, so I can't really blame the coaching staff completely. He broke his foot, and then he broke his other foot, or I can't remember. He re-broke the same foot same way.
3 years in a row where he had feet trouble.
So they moved into tight end for a little bit. So his career was strange. I can't really just kill the coaching staff for it, but they got production from guys that just weren't all that great. And, I think getting a new defensive line coach, really helped them out too. But I'm sorry.
I was going to say one thing was...
I'm not allowing you to
no, what was,
go Bob Stoops on me.
So, in the end, what I was going to say is
okay.
If that defensive line that year, one of the guys that stepped up was Chuka and Dulue.
Yes.
I mean, how many screens did he stop that year? I mean, I think that's basically all he did was backing coverage on screens, but he played really well that year. And I guess you could say that the senior to step up, the guy that's been waiting around to have his moment is who? I mean, there's no. I mean, Jordan Evans is the leader now, right? And he's had his time.
It'd have to be Matt Romar, but you're expecting him. Yeah. I mean, you have expectation that he's going to be one of your best players,
right? So
Matt Diamond, I think, is undervalued a little bit. Yeah. I think he's a really good player.
But I mean, at linebacker this year, you have Evans. And then that's it for leadership. And so the guys coming in, I mean, is Emmanuel Beal, is he really going to jump over Curtis Bolton and Arthur McGinnis to back up Tay Evans and Jordan Evans? So what concerns me about the linebacker core is I think you can make it work. I think you can find 3 or 4 guys to make it work, but there's no depth. I mean, if who goes down that doesn't hurt you, that doesn't make things really, really difficult. And Eddie, how about this? I'll ask you, of these new guys coming in, who do you see as the impact guy? Who do you see coming in? And I mean, is it Caleb Kelly, the 5-star?
I mean, I don't think that there's any doubt it's going to be Caleb. He's just one of those guys that I saw him work out at the Los Angeles Rivals camp. And I mean, you can stand on one side of the field and look at the linebacker group, and it's like, yeah, that's Caleb Kelly right there. I mean, he just moves so well and does everything so well.
Yeah, and I saw him in Baltimore at the 5-star, and I mean, he just screams. Yeah, I'm bigger, better, faster than everybody out here.
And that's the thing is, people don't realize how big he is. He is a big guy. I know that you saw him down on the sidelines at the spring game.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going to be able to put on, I would say, if he gets here early, he's going to be able to put on 15 pounds of good weight before the season starts.
And Mark Jackson, an Army All-American, a great pass rusher, is also going to come in. And I think he's a ferocious pass rusher, an aggressive pass rusher. But I think Caleb Kelly can also do those things and be good in coverage and be trustworthy as an athlete covering guys. So I think Caleb Kelly might be the guy. But although Ricky DeBerry, Obo Okoronkwo, the spring game, I think that there were some question marks there, but I think they both played really well.
Ricky DeBerry does some really good things, and this is kind of people I've talked to. He does more flashy things than Obo does. Obo does some really good things, but when it comes down to it, both of those guys can be replaced by a better player. There's better. They expect and can get better production from someone than what those two showed him in the spring.
What happened to Obo? Because I heard rave reviews about him. Maybe I'm the only one, but when he came in, I remember hearing your boy Dusty Dvorak said he could be like a Von Miller type when he was a true freshman coming in. And I think every year I heard something similar. Hey, this guy can rush. This guy can rush the passer.
Well, he was suspended some last year for academic issues. I think, I talked to him about that earlier in the spring. He said that he's grown up, but I still think there's some maturity issues there with him. I know with Ricky DeBerry, it's really lining up. It's alignment issues that he's having and things that he shouldn't be having after being here for a year. So, that doesn't mean that freshmen are going to be any better at it. So they might be there, but it is weird with Obo because he seems to have all the tools. He looked okay in the spring game, looked really good at times. Maybe we're making too much out of it. Maybe it's not Eric Stryker and it's not Devontae Bond, but that doesn't mean that it's just trash.
If we're talking about linebackers, I thought maybe one of the more impressive guys during the spring game, surprisingly, was Dalton Rodriguez, a kind of a blast from the past name. I mean, he does add a little bit of length. I don't know if he's going to necessarily be a guy that could be considered as a guy that adds depth, but he did have 2.5 sacks, I think he was credited for, a batted pass. Yep. I mean, he does add some length that I don't think that I guess they haven't had in a while. I don't know if you can find much of a 6'6" linebacker out there, but he did at least offer a little bit of flash during the spring game, and it'll be interesting to see if he really is a guy that is in a rotation once they start, I guess, 2 days.
Yeah, and after the game, we asked him about the transition because he was originally on the defensive line, move into linebacker, and we said, so how come you made that switch? And he said, well, because I weigh 220 pounds on the defensive line. That's why. So he said he understands that he still needs to even put on weight as a linebacker, but he's much closer to that now than he was at the defensive line. And so if he bulks up, fills out that frame a little bit, he clearly showed some skills. And remember, he is a walk-on technically, but OU offered him a scholarship out of high school.
Yeah.
He was a scholarship player, so he's somebody to watch as well in that linebacker group. I agree.
I'm going to say, I want to move on from the linebackers and just discuss the rest of the defense briefly, but I'm going to say if I gave a biggest disappointment award out for the defensive side of the ball this spring, probably be for PJ and
Bonasaur is what I was going to say, yeah.
I mean, he's a guy that's got a position that's ready-made for him to take it over and just hasn't been consistent, and that's what you worry about. It's like, every time you hear Mike Stoops or Kerry Cooks or somebody talk about a cornerback that's not consistent, it bothers me because it's not like they have a lot of responsibilities. It's basically just, can the guy stay awake, and not be a right fielder picking daisies? And I don't get the sense that PJ is mature enough to really handle taking over this job after the spring.
Well, yeah.
And maybe that's harsh or unfair, but that's the sense I get.
I don't know about PJ's maturity. You guys would have a better feel on that than I would, being out at practice more often. But I would say that you're right about the opportunity is there. I mean, could it be any more set up for PJ to take that spot? He's a big-time recruit. He is a big-time kid, just the way his frame. I mean, he's got long arms. He's muscular. He's tall. He can flip his hips. So why is this guy not beating Dakota Austin, who's 5'9", 125, 130 pounds.
Which, to be fair, he can play.
Oh, he can. This is nothing against Dakota Austin. Dakota Austin has maxed out his skill level. Props to that kid because he played well at times last year, filling in for both cornerbacks when needed, Zach Sanchez and Jordan Thomas. So this isn't a slight against Dakota Austin. It's just the reality. He is a 5'9", 2-star cornerback with PJ and Bonasaur, rivals 250, 4-star, 6'2", typical-looking corner behind him, and PJ can't take the reins of that job, which leaves open the door for Jordan Parker, a big-time kid out of California coming in this summer to maybe seize that number 2 cornerback job.
Well, if there's somebody that can do it, that's the position to do it at. I mean, I'd trust that more than I would an outside linebacker.
As far as a freshman coming in.
Yeah, a freshman coming in and being
able to
Let me finish
this direct message to Dakota Austin. Add 2 haters to the list.
I'm not hating on Dakota Austin. I saw what he could do last year.
No, I agree. I mean, he definitely the eye test, and I think that
I like that kid too. Though.
People will say too that he did play well when he made starts,
Played
but
great.
At the same time they were against Iowa State, Kansas, and then I guess he made his first start against Tech, and he had a pick in that game too. So he might just be one of those kids that just keeps grinding.
That's why you
hashtag grind.
Yeah. Is that Eddie?
That's the definition of hashtag grind.
That's a
hashtag grind. Up by 10 a.m. That's Eddie.
Yes.
Who would be some other good grinders for the Stoops era? Price Macon jumps to mind.
Yeah.
Someone who sticks around towards the end. Jonathan Nelson, people like that.
Yeah. That's
Although Jonathan Nelson ran like a 4.2 something coming out of high school. I mean, he was really good.
Flying.
Yeah.
I'd have to go in the Caleb Gastelum territory.
Yeah, that's a good one. But that's still a walk-on.
Jonathan
He
Nelson.
lost to Texas
Jonathan
game, though,
Nelson
didn't he?
was a corner who got better when they moved him to safety. So that's kind of,
It's the direct opposite of Julian Wilson.
Yes, but I think we all knew he wasn't a corner.
That's true.
Even when he was in high school.
That's true.
So all right. Otherwise, secondary, I don't think I didn't have any issues. I mean, I think Stephen Parker was impressive. Ahmad Thomas doesn't look lost for the first time in his career to me.
That whole entire secondary is just kind of they're all really, 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 really good.
Jordan Thomas might be the best one out of all of them.
They have a chance to be maybe one of the better. I would have to think they have a chance to be one of the better secondaries Stoops has ever put out there in the 18 years that he's been in Norman now.
And Corey Coleman and Josh Doxson are about to be drafted tonight, so that also helps. And you're going to park Jordan Thomas on each Big 12's number 1 receiver, and with those 2 guys gone, the number 2 guy that we just talked about, whether it's Dakota Austin, PJ Bonasaur, or Jordan Parker, their job just got a lot easier because they have Jordan Thomas the other side. And then on the back end, they have two experienced guys playing with each other, Stephen Parker and Ahmad Thomas, which Ahmad Thomas in itself is a big story because I think many people expected last year one of those big-time freshman safeties to end up taking that job.
In front of him.
Yep, and he held on to it the whole way, to his credit, and he seems to have a stranglehold on it at his senior year as well.
All right, before we get out of here, I want to hit on a little bit of the NFL draft getting ready to start here. We're going to get this podcast up tonight on Thursday night. What is it, April 28th? Is what our date is. By the way, Eddie, you have plenty of things to brag about with your Cubs these days and how great your fans are.
So good.
Just got this update from Yahoo Sports. Thieves steal giant cutout of Royals player from Kansas City billboard. That's pretty awesome.
Some thieves
Talk about a fathead. Well, obviously,
was it like
Royals
out in front
fans,
of Kaufman?
Just a giant billboard in Kansas City somewhere.
How do you steal a billboard?
That's pretty impressive.
That is impressive.
That's devotion right there.
And you have to. That sounds like something you have to do during the or attack during the nightfall. I mean, you have to do that while the sun's down, right?
Sounds like an 80s movie is what it sounds like.
That's pretty cool. All right, let's talk about the NFL draft. Joe DuVall, you've done a lot of work on the draft this week and done a great job. And obviously, Sterling Shepard has kind of been the guy that has floated up to the top of most mock drafts. Tonight's the first round. Throw it to you guys. Chances Sterling Shepard is taken tonight.
I would probably put the over-under at, I don't know, somewhere around 5 to 10%. What do you think, Eddie?
Probably about the same. I think that, strangely, it would be such a good situation for him to go tonight and go to a franchise that's already kind of considered there.
Yeah,
if you can sneak into a New England Patriot situation at the back end of the first round,
that'd be nice.
That's one of the best situations I think that could possibly happen to him.
I think everybody. I don't know if there's anybody that's rooting for Sterling Shepard that wouldn't love him to go to the New England Patriots. I mean, that just kind of feels like a perfect
fit.
And you're right. If his name is called tonight, it's going to be called by a team that's pretty well set at the back end of this first round. It could be the Panthers maybe might take a chance on him. And to be honest, what Sterling needs to happen is to have some receivers go, right? He needs some guys to just go off the board.
He needs Coleman and Laquan Treadwell and Josh Doxson to go early and often.
Yep, so that's something to watch for tonight. If you're wanting Sterling Shepard to go in the first round, start watching those receivers. Watch when Doxson goes off the board. Watch when Coleman goes off the board. And if they go off early, that gives Shepard a really good shot for someone to reach. And not to say that it would be a reach, but for someone to make a pick that not many people are seeing coming. But I think either way, he's gone tomorrow.
Mock drafts, I don't know, Eddie, how much you've kept abreast of everything. Joe, feel free to jump in here. But Charles Tapper, what's kind of the consensus on him out there that you've seen?
Tapper, I mean, he could be like a fourth-round guy. I wouldn't be shocked to see him go later. I would be shocked to see him go a little earlier. Maybe someone gets enamored with that 40 time. Maybe someone sees that 40 time from the combine. Was it 4.59? It was sub 4.6, which is just absurd.
It was good.
I mean, if I know people say this all the time. I know Josh is one of the big proponents. Go stand next to someone who runs a 4.6 and watch how fast they move. That is blazing speed. And for Charles Tapper to be nearly 300 pounds to be moving like that, that's insane. And so you could see somebody getting enamored with that. Although I wonder. Geno Grissom still fell to the fourth, right?
Yeah.
There are freak athletes all over the place. Tapper had so much inconsistency, and he didn't show off enough moves, enough versatility, I think, to make him higher than that fourth-round ceiling.
What an odd career Charles Tapper had at Oklahoma. I feel like there was really, really good at the front end, kind of a question mark in the middle, and then it's like something clicked at about the fourth or fifth game last year, and then the last 7 games were great.
I'm honestly not surprised by his arc because he's one of those guys. He came to Oklahoma to become a professional football player from the Baltimore area, came to OU as a business decision. I think when he was a junior, he got dollar signs in his eyes, stopped focusing on what it took to be a great football player. I think Dyron Reynolds was great for him to come in and really was able to reach him at a level maybe somebody else didn't. Not saying anything against Jerry Montgomery, but I think having a guy that had been in the league that long really got him to understand where he needed to go. Whereas, other guys might have just used motivation. Well, you're going to get to the league someday. And he probably had a lot of friends and family telling him, you've done great. You're going to you can leave after this year if you want to and make a team somewhere and then make a lot of money. But I just really think he got dollar signs in his eyes. And once he realized it, I credit that kid a lot because he's probably one of the most mature kids on the defensive side of the ball that we've seen come through here. He and Eric Stryker, probably 5 years before that. Gerald McCoy might have been the most mature kid since him.
There was, just that whole core of senior guys, and especially the two that you mentioned on the defensive side of the ball, I think were probably, I don't know if it was underplayed, but there was a reason why they made that significant jump last season. And, Joe, staying on the defensive side of the ball, we just mentioned Eric Stryker. He's a guy that it's an odd situation for him the next 3 days, I would think.
Yeah, he's a crapshoot, really. I think people out there think he could possibly maybe go up into the fourth in that Tapper area if somebody really gets enamored with his skill set. And there are people that think he might not get drafted. It's really that kind of a wide range for Stryker. It's going to be a situation that
he's going to have to go to a team that they're like, we want Eric Stryker to do this, to come into our franchise and do this, fill this
and
void.
We like his character and we like his motor.
His tenacity.
We don't know where we're going to play him,
right,
but we'll see if we can find a spot.
And he'll wow people in those areas. He'll wow them in the interviews on tape. You'll see his tenacity. He's not a guy who takes plays off. This is a guy who plays every down. He gives 100%. And
to me, his biggest problem is he is not a safety.
Right.
He is not a safety.
What position do you? Don't tell me he's an outside linebacker, and don't tell me he's a safety because he's neither of those in the NFL. He's just Eric Stryker. He's somebody who has to. He's somebody who teams just really need to get enamored with what he can do. And you know what? Mike Stoops did, and it worked out pretty well for him. He made a role, carved it specifically for Eric Stryker because there were things the defense was doing last year that they would never do with any other players, but they decided we got Eric Stryker. We have to use them. So now the hope is there's a defensive coordinator out there in the NFL that's thinking the same thing.
Any other thoughts, Joe, on draft before we get out of here?
What about Sanchez? It's going to be – I kind of find him a really interesting figure just in that there are some OU fans that absolutely can't stand him, or at least out of my group of friends. And then there's some people that just love him because he made a lot of plays. It's do or die.
I don't understand why you can't stand him, though.
I don't know. I'm with the group that loves Zach. I love Zach, everything that he brings. I like the way that he handles himself, the way that he talks trash to people. But there are games that people remember him getting burned a lot.
Zach Sanchez is the man. I like that kid a lot. He is great. He makes interceptions, which I don't know if people are talking about enough, which seems silly. It's such a basic thing, but to me, a huge part of that role is I can find an athlete. I can find a guy who flips his hips.
He has good hands.
I can find a guy who runs. I can't find that many corners to make interceptions. I can't find guys with those instincts, and I can't find guys with that ability to make the catch in the moment. They're guys who have good hands, but when that moment hits them, they get jittered and they drop it every time. Zach does not. So and also, here's something else. Somebody from inside the program told me that he was the guy in games at halftime, Tennessee, think of that, where he's the one firing up guys. He's the leader. And so thinking team next year, you wonder how you're going to replace him on OU. But that's also something he brings to the table in the NFL. But the fan stuff, Eddie is not bringing that up out of nowhere. There are people that are not huge Zach Sanchez fans, and I think that comes down to the tackling, right? He was
you're right.
He was not a willing tackler.
It's the old school, get off my lawn crowd is what it is.
Dakota Austin coming in and being a better tackler didn't help his case. That juxtaposition just really kind of makes Zach look bad when Dakota's coming in and being a better tackler than you are. To Zach's credit, he did have shoulder injuries during his time, which kind of inhibited his play
and his
a little bit,
ankle was a lot worse than they ever let on this last year. The fact that he even came back for Baylor is like a minor miracle. And he intercepted a pass in that game. So, or was it two? I think it's just one.
Well, Mott had
more than Jalen Ramsey did.
Yeah.
Jalen Ramsey, how many interceptions does that guy have?
I was really shocked that he didn't have an interception all year.
That is unbelievable. He might go number 3 in the draft tonight, and he didn't have an interception last year.
Anybody else that we can think of that has an opportunity to get drafted?
Devontae Bond could go, I think.
Devontae Bond. I would think Devontae Bond definitely goes before Eric Stryker goes, and probably, I would say not too far after Tapper.
I think that'd be an interesting poll to OU fans.
I think he's one of those guys that NFL people know a lot about, but I don't think like the mock people really get who he is or what. Because there's always like the Mel Kipers of the world. those are the guys that ignore people like Devontae Bond because he played 1 year. He missed some games this year, but you watch his film, and he's a great football player.
But I guarantee you on Friday or Saturday when he's drafted, Mel Kiper will stand up there, and he'll tell you that he watched every single game, and Devontae Bond's a guy that really popped. What an idiot.
God, so I wish I had my Frank Caliendo Todd right now.
Todd. So, Ed, you're not watching ESPN for coverage tonight?
I will not.
Really? You going with the NFL?
Yeah, I like NFL Network.
Okay.
I love Mike Mayock, though.
Yeah, he's good.
What are your feelings on spoilers, too? Because I think this is, to me, I have to stay off Twitter now because I don't want the spoilers. I have to like go back in after every pick and then check Twitter after the pick because, I like the magic of television a little bit. Maybe I'm old school
The first round, I'm with you, but when it's,
that's fair.
Middle of Saturday and I'm thrashed and I can't stand to watch anymore.
Totally fair.
Then I switch over to Twitter.
Yeah, that could just become a scroll at that point. Just start telling me who's picked at that point. But first round, let the TV have their moment. I kind of like that.
All right, fellas. Hey, it was a good podcast. Good first podcast. Appreciate you guys coming in and being a part of it. We're almost an hour long. So, wow, time really flies, I guess, on these things. But we appreciate you guys listening. We're going to be back again soon. We'll try and make this more of a regular thing. We promised, we're going to start doing more podcasts, and we're starting to deliver a little bit. So, Joe, I'm sorry you had to be initiated with the story about your spring duties as a photographer.
Set the bar low.
It's okay. You're still getting a paycheck, so it's fine. Eddie, appreciate it as always. And,
absolutely.
We will check back with you guys. And let me put this straight. The recruiting podcast, we'll make those only for Sooner Scoop subscribers. The team podcast, we're going to start having these on iTunes and things like that so everybody can listen to them. So just want you guys to understand how this is all going to work out moving forward in the future. But for Eddie Radosevich, for Joe DuVall, I'm Carey Murdock. We'll see you next time on the SoonerScoop.com podcast.